Randall watched Ishral's shimmering form creep into the room on his tiptoes as if he was stealthy enough no one would notice. Randall shook his head. Clown. Yeah, Yank, Lewis said, taking a step forwards, little suspecting he was now face to face with Ishral. What are they going to do, fire you? This newfound bravado was spreading like swine flu though the do-gooders. Ishral scrutinized Lewis' face, then tuned to Randall. Don't you even think about it, Randall. I wasn't, Randall replied. And just out of malice Randall made the demon turn back into a schoolgirl wearing a Halloween mask again. He was disappointed it didn't make him feel any better about this new turn of events. Ishral for his part didn't even seem to notice, he was so transfixed by the box. Randall watched as Ishral took a tentative step towards the box on the table, then began to shake so much Randall thought his mask would fall right off his face. Then after a moment the demon/schoolgirl scuttled back behind Randall, shielding himself from the poem's power. Coward, Randall said and wished he could kick the little shit in the pants. The three of them looked at Randall quizzically as he seemed to zone out somewhat and say coward over his shoulder. They exchanged a look of bewilderment followed by a round of shrugs. Ishral peered from behind Randall's leg. Randall, grab the box, he whimpered. Ah. Yeah, right. Randall snorted in response. Nichols cleared his throat and Randall looked at him as if he had just appeared out of thin air. Oh, sorry, Randall said. Now, where were we? You were just leaving, Lewis said. Randall took in the room and weighed up his options. The truth was nobody, not the priest, he suspected, not even himself or Ishral knew what would happen if he was able to unleash the full power of the poem right here in this little corner of suburbia. He cursed his lack of preparation. The demon charm he had in his hand was just a bluff, the spent one he had used to summon the demon on the stairs, which in itself was nothing more than a mere illusion he had conjured to mask his arrival and scare the shit out of everyone in the room. It had worked perfectly but had no real power of its own. It couldn't attack or defend Randall, which was why it had not been affected by the power radiating from the box. If only he had prepared another, something with a bit more bite so to speak. He doubted it would have done much once it felt the power of the poem's presence, but it may have caused just about enough blind panic to allow Randall time to take the box, or at least try to destroy it. If that were even possible. But this was all conjecture anyway, in the presence of the box any of his creatures would just turn tail and run, if his brand of magic would even work at all this close to the poem. Also, would one of his kind even be able to touch the thing? He had heard the stories of course, of the mythical miner's poem and its potential, but it had always sounded like so much horse shit to him. Until now. Anyway, he told himself, there would be time enough to worry about the poem later. This was just a recce prelude to the end game but that was all. And it had borne fruit. McCulloch was here for sure, if not for the taking just yet. But at least he wasn't going anywhere, poem or no poem he wasn't going to leave this place with body, let alone soul intact. Ah, the poem. Just what did the priest know about its potential? What did anyone? Certainly not Randall. He smiled, and just couldn't help himself saying, how do I know that thing is even real? Randall. Don't provoke him. Ishral pleaded and scuttled away to the doorway, ready to beat a hasty retreat. Nichols moved around the back of the table and slid the box over to himself, slowly and deliberately. Anya, Lewis. Cover me would you please? The two of them made a great show of re-aiming at Randall as the priest carefully opened the box. The effect was instantaneous, an almost physical blow to Randall's chest. Ishral screamed like a girl and was gone in a heartbeat. The pressure in the whole room seemed to become oppressive as the sickening power emerged from the open box. It felt like a stun grenade has suddenly gone off, but in extreme slow motion. A wave of power pulsating out from the box. It hit Randall, almost knocking the wind right out of him, and he had to fight the urge to just turn tail and run. An urge which increased with every passing second the box was open. Randall was the trigger, if he hadn't been in the room he was sure the effect would be negligible at best. The presence of evil had kicked the scroll into life. Wave after wave of pulsating energy broke over the collector and it took all his will not to stagger back a pace or two. It was like standing close to a massive bass speaker. Boom, boom, boom. By the surprised look on the faces of the others, they felt it too, but not as acutely as Randall. Then a look of sheer terror flashed across Nichols' face as he prepared himself to read aloud. He glanced up at Randall, his face ashen now. He was terrified of what he was about to unleash. It could make the whole city burn for all the priest knew. Randall grabbed onto that terror with both hands, gladly taking it as a cue for a ceasefire. Okay. Point taken, Randall blurted. Take it easy, holy man. I believe you. There was a tangible feeling of collective relief around the room as Nichols gently closed the lid and Randall felt like he could breathe again. The priest slumped slightly and had to brace himself against the table with both hands to avoid collapsing. "Now," Nichols said breathlessly. "Get out, or do you want me to continue?" "No need for that," Randall said. This wasn't his finest hour, but the priest had given him a get out where he could keep at least a little dignity intact. "I'll go," he conceded. "See Mr. Randall out, will you, Lewis?" Nichols asked. "That would be my absolute pleasure," Lewis replied. He gestured towards the door. "After you, Hellspawn." "I'll see myself out, thanks," Randall replied testily, then turned to McCulloch, who was still cowering in the corner with an almost comical look of bemusement on his face. "I will see you soon, Larry." McCulloch just gawked at him, so Randall turned and walked off, out of the room and down the stairs. He was glad no one in the room could see the look of shame on his face. If his entrance had been triumphant, his exit was quite the reverse. He was just thankful Ishrel had beaten a retreat first. He could not have lived with himself if the little bastard had seen this. For a full 20 seconds everyone in the room just stared after him in shock. Peroni snapped out of it first. "Father, you did it," she said excitedly and rushed over to give him a rib-cracking hug. "Thanks," he said meekly and marveled at just how strong she was. "Yeah." Lewis shook his head in disbelief and went over to the door just to make sure Randall was really gone. "That was something else." "It was too close," Nichols replied as Peroni finally released him. "Too close." Now that the immediate danger had passed, Larry leapt up and into the center of the room, his arms flailing. "What the hell is wrong with you? Why didn't you cream that bastard?" He wanted to know. "Larry, please." Nichols barely had enough energy to slope over to the bed. Once there he sat down hard, holding his head in his hands, exhausted. Tears were close but he fought them off. "Never mind that," Larry continued. "Don't you see him? He was shitting himself. You could have ended this there and then." Nichols had neither the strength nor the desire to argue. He stared down at his hands that hadn't stopped shaking since he'd opened the box. He shuddered inwardly at its dark, horrible power. How could such a thing created to fight evil feel so malevolent? He could smell it on him. Pure dripping evil. "Well?" Larry insisted. "Larry, leave him alone, can't you see what it's done to him?" Peroni said. "Bollocks, he lost his nerve." Before Larry could react, Peroni lunged at him, grabbing him by the scruff of the neck. "Can't you just be glad he's gone, you ungrateful?" She bit her lip and pushed him away. Larry staggered backwards until he hit the wall. "Fucking bitch," he blurted and was about to lay into her when Lewis moved in between them both. Now, folks, let's all just calm down, eh?" He gently pushed Larry back, but keeping his eye on Peroni. She nodded and turned away. "That's better." He straightened Larry's sweat-soaked shirt. "No harm done." Larry knocked his hands away and moved to curse Peroni again, but the way she snapped her head back around and the look of murder in her eyes suggested discretion was the better option, as he clearly might just get a smack in the mouth for his trouble. That, and she had a gun. When Randall got outside, he had managed to regain most of his shattered composure. As he stepped out into the bitter morning air, he found Ishrel at the gate at the end of the overground garden path. The demon had managed to shed the humiliating form Randall had chosen for it, and had, instead of the normal heat haze, it had in fact reverted to the form of a deformed imp-like creature which Randall hadn't seen for a good long while. It looked to Randall like a cross between a lizard and a skinned ape, with its black scaly skin and arms and legs just too long for its body, like they had been put through a wringer. Ishrel hopped up to sit precariously on the gate and slapped his spindly hands together excitedly, a toothy grin ripped across his hideous face. This incarnation was Ishrel's own creation. He knew it took the demon quite a bit of power to conjure. Out of spite, Randall briefly contemplated changing the demon into something more comical again to lighten his mood, but the truth of it was this form suited Ishrel, and although he was loath to admit it, for all Randall longing for human company, recent events showed all too clearly that it was company he no longer belonged in. There was something strangely comforting being around a good old-fashioned looking demon again. He was with his own kind around the creature, and maybe he should just accept that fact and stop pining after a life long since lost. "Lucifer in a nightshirt," Randall said, approaching Ishrel. "Did you feel that thing?" "And that was just from him opening the box," Ishrel said, still clapping and nodding his head vigorously like a nightmare version of one of those cymbal-clashing old monkey toys. "Imagine if the priest has actually recited the verse." Ishrel's cat-like eyes flashed with perverse excitement. "Yeah," Randall replied and leant against the gate next to him. He looked up at the house. "Miner's fucking poem. Who would have thought it?" Ishrel nodded and began drumming his hands on his legs as he sat. You could say it complicates things, Randall said, mulling over his next move. At last a challenge. Well, he had wanted things to liven up and they certainly had. It changes everything. Forget McCulloch, Ishrel ordered. It is now your duty to get that poem. Randall cringed inwardly, he knew that was coming. It is a prize worthy of the fallen one himself, Ishrel continued, eyes wide as he imagined the potential glory. We must get our hands on it. Our hands? Randall thought there was only one of them who was going to have to get his hands dirty, and it wasn't the lizard monkey boy perched on the gate. Forget it, Ishrel, Randall said firmly. My brief is to get McCulloch, that's all. You can keep your ancient games. I insist, Ishrel said and jumped down from the gate. He did his best to square up against the 6-foot collector, but barely came up to his chest. I am ordering you to get that poem. It was all Randall could do not to laugh down into Ishrel's crumpled face. I don't care, he told him in his best condescending tone. Put it out of your tiny little mind. Now why don't you slide back up there out of the way, and let me think, Randall said, patting the gate. Better still, pop off and get me some info on how I can fight that thing, or at least get round it. The demon folded his arms and pouted like a petulant child and waited for Randall to relent. Randall just looked down at him with raised eyebrows, until finally Ishrel snorted and spun away in a huff. There is no way to fight the poem, Ishrel said with his back to Randall. Randall couldn't tell if Ishrel was just being obstructive or if, as he suspected, no one really knew how to fight a poem. Myth or no myth, that power was real enough, and its presence in the house caused Randall a major headache. Any creature he sent in there would turn tail and run at just a whiff of the power of the poem. He couldn't help but smile, impressed. Clever priest. He turned to Ishrel. You know, I think I like this guy. Huh? You never were much of a judge of character, Ishrel said, and actually stamped his foot although it made no sound. Must be why I like you so much. Still, I can't believe they would let one of those things out of the Vatican with only a 3-man protection team and a priest. And all for a nobody like McCulloch. A conundrum indeed. In the hours since Randall had left, an uneasy truce had descended on the occupants of the safe house, thought the mood was still one of grim uncertainty. Lewis was back at his post on the landing after looking downstairs, from which he had returned to report that yes, the living room window, steel shutters and all, was no more, gone the same way as half the side of the house. No one knew how the hell the waking street beyond had not noticed the demolition as they made their various way to work of on the school run. But they had all soon decided that was the least strange thing that had happened this morning.